The Reds' weekend against the Tigers may cause doubt in the plan for the trade deadline.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're Locked On Reds, your daily source for all things Cincinnati Reds. I'm Stephen Offenbaker. He's Jeff Carr. We love baseball. We love these Cincinnati Reds, and we have taken our love for the game. We've taken our love for this team that never loves us back, and we have turned it into information for you. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day, and on today's podcast, we're going to ask the question, and it's a tough one. Should the Reds be sellers, given the way that they played over the weekend against the Tigers, and with the fact that there are now 2 new injuries to talk about amongst the outfielders? We're going to take a look at what has gone wrong in 2024 along the way today, but we promise we will finish on a high note where we talk about AllStar Elly De La Cruz. So there's a lot to get to today, Jeff. And before we get to any of it, I want to shout out the sponsor of today's show. Today's episode of Locked On Reds is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Did you know that it's never too late to resolve your tax issues with the IRS? Don't wait. Reduce your tax debt and get help from a team of licensed tax professionals. Call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. All right, Jeff, the IRS is not going to be able to get us any help on the Reds right now unless maybe they can force the Castellinis to sell. Things are bad. Things are as bad as they have been in a long time. And as recently as Saturday, I made the case that the Reds should be buyers, that they should be looking to upgrade this team and make a push for the playoffs. Given what I saw on the field over the weekend against the Detroit Tigers, plus adding in the information that we learned that, one, Nick Martini hurt his thumb and is expected to miss a significant amount of time, and 2, Stuart Fairchild is now nursing a back injury. So let's put this in a clear perspective, Jeff. Right now on the Reds' active roster of outfielders, there's Will Benson, Blake Dunn, Stuart Fairchild, and Spencer Steer. Those are the 4 guys listed on the Reds roster for outfield. Stuart Fairchild's hurt. That leaves 3 guys. They've added Edwin Rios. They've added Livan Soto from Louisville. Neither one of those guys are true outfielders. My point is this. As recently as Saturday, I said they should buy. What I'm seeing and saying now is there is no one move that Nick Krall can make that will make this team be a playoff contender. There's multiple moves that need to be made. And I just don't think that that can be done. And if that's the case, if they can't upgrade this team enough to get them in the playoffs, blow it up. Sell every piece of furniture that you can sell that is not nailed down. I'm talking about the bullpen, Jeff. Everybody in the bullpen should be available for trade if they bring you something in return. Frankie Montas should be traded if you can get something in return. Jamer Candelario, traded if you can get something in return. And here's the one that's going to piss people off. Jonathan India should be traded because his value is up again right now.
I don't think that constitutes blowing it up, though. I think we need to define blowing it up.
Well, trading everybody that's not a rookie. Trading everybody that's
periphery.
not.
You're trading the margins. You're trading players on the margins. Maybe, but I don't think so. I think that the Reds are either buyers or they stand pat. There are plenty of reasons as to why this weekend stunk for the Reds. A series sweep against the Detroit Tigers, who, quite frankly, aren't good. They're not bad, but they're not good either. This should have been a team that they should have won the series against at the very least. At the very, very least, they should have won 1 out of 3. And quite frankly, I still think we would not have been that happy with that.
Nope.
But consider this for one moment. 3 losses are horrible. Mm-hmm. But the 6 games of the Yankees and the Tigers, would you have taken 3-3 if it was 2 out of 3 against the Tigers and 1 out of 3 against the Yankees?
I don't know.
That's what they did. They went 3-3.
I know. I know they did.
And it's not like what's the best consolation prize the Reds can get. I'm not trying to make that argument. But what I'm saying is, as bad as it looks right now, if you really expand out and look at the bigger picture, this isn't scorched earth. This isn't, quite frankly, where the Cubs are. And the Cubs actually just won a series, and maybe they're getting the ship right a little bit, but the Cubs have been so bad that they're far below the Reds. So when I look at the way that this season has continued to go, lots of peaks and valleys, things that Nick Krall said we weren't going to see a lot of. We're not quite there yet to where we can get rid of those, but that's what this team has been, largely due to the fact that they've had injuries. And that's the other part of this, because, okay, say the Reds do trade in the margins. The idea of being sellers, the Reds can't do that because their core is young players. The majority of their team is young players that are going to be here under team control for 5 years, sometimes even 6, depending on who you're looking at. I think that the only trades that you're making are the bullpen guys, and you're going to get low-level prospects for them. Jeimer Candelario, I don't think you can trade him. He's got a multiple-year contract, and he's got tendinitis. The reason that Spencer Steer cannot be listed as an outfielder right now is because he's got to play first base, because Jeimer Candelario can't do it. He's got a DH. So there's these other things where it's just like the value that you're going to get in return for some of these guys, I don't think is going to be anything that really helps you out. And maybe in the case you could make for like an expiring contract to Lucas Sims, sure, but the Reds should continue to be focused on getting a multiple year control player. If that does cost Jonathan India, then we should consider that trade. But this should not be a situation where the Reds are only getting back prospects. That makes no sense for this team.
I don't see how it benefits this team, Jeff, if they're going to stand pat, keeping any of those guys. Someone will take a flyer on Jeimer Candelario. He's hit well enough over the last 2 months, and I know he's in a bit of a slump right now, but he showed that he can still be hot when he's hot. I think someone would look at that as a valuable addition for a playoff run. Same with Jonathan India. He would be looked at as a valuable addition for a playoff run. Frankie Montas could be somebody's 5th starter, and that's a valuable addition for a run down the stretch. Those guys, I think, have some value. Now, you're right. It's not going to be a blockbuster deal. But what I'm saying is if you're not going to do anything, or you're not going to fix the problems and the problems keep continuing to mount. If you can't do either, you can't do either of those things, then trade those guys away and start building already for 2025. Free up the cash. All of Candelario, India, and Montas all have potential 2-year deals, with Montas being an option, but India and Candelario have a deal in place for next year. That helps with the trading. They're not renting players. They're going to get team control in addition to that. So it just seems to me that this team can't be fixed at this point. The outfield is ridiculous. The outfielders that remain can't hit. It's very problematic. In addition to what's going on in the outfield, I'm not sure that Noelvi Marte doesn't need to be sent back to Louisville to work on some things, because he looks like a guy that just can't figure it out right now. So you start taking all of these pieces one after the other, Jeff, and what does it gain the Reds to just sit on their hands? Either sell it or buy it, but sitting on your hands is the absolute worst thing that Nick Krall could do.
I think we're saying the same thing, just in 2 different ways. You're saying build for 2025. Mm-hmm. I'm saying build for 2025. But the differences here are, it's like, how do these trades help them for 2025? It can't be for prospects. If they trade Jonathan India for prospects, I'll be mad. They should be going out and looking for guys that help this team maybe, continue or start to tread water. Go get some outfielders, whatever that might look like. The Brewers are able to do this with pitching. I mean, we're not excited about Dallas Keuchel, and nobody is saying that Aaron Savale is going to go out there and win a Cy Young, but the Brewers had a need at starting pitcher. They're in the front of the division. They realize that what they're doing with their starting pitching of just rolling in guys who just might happen to have a healthy arm is not sustainable. So they go and they make some moves, and they're not moves that cost them very much. The Reds should be able to do this with outfielders. They should be able to do this with depth pieces. And then also maybe go trade for like a Brent Rooker or something like that. I think that it's weird when we look at the Reds and we ask if they're buyers or are they sellers, because they cannot be sellers in the typical sense of the word. If they trade for prospects, it makes no sense right now. There is no point in building for 2028 or 2029, because quite frankly, most of this team will still be here by then. So
Well,
go get. Yeah.
Part of what I see though is like how it helps them for 2025 by trading, say, Candelario and India, is you take Candelario and India's salary and you go buy a shiny new outfielder in the offseason.
Love that. No, we're on the same page with that. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think we're kind of saying the same thing, but I hear you, and it's not seller as a true sense of the word. But what I want to reiterate is he can't sit on his hands. It either has to be make that trade that you're talking about with the Athletics, make a trade with the White Sox, go upgrade the team for somebody with team control, or free up the capital, admit that you got to go in a different direction as far as the holes you need to fill via free agency, trade Candelario, trade India, take that money and go buy an outfielder that you should have bought last offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. The hard part will be finding the trade partner for that, because the teams that will want the relief pitchers, the Candelarios, the guys like that on this roster, are the teams in contention, and they're not going to want to give up anybody that could help the Reds next year. It's going to be a very interesting puzzle for Nick Krall to figure out, but what we are both saying is he got to figure it out. He's got to do something. This team has been so frustrating in that there's been so many injuries. And people keep saying, well, that's an excuse. No, that's the reality of this. Mm-hmm. The problem, though, is, okay, injuries mean you can't really blame the roster on the field, so who do you blame? You blame the front office. You got to go get some people to fill in these holes that keep popping up. And they haven't even done that on the waiver wire. They haven't even done that for guys that are on the open market right now, who quite frankly aren't sexy. I mean, you're not going to look at it on the open market and find a game changer, but are you going to find somebody that's actually had outfield experience so you don't have to play Levi Jordan and Santiago Espinal in the outfield? Probably so. So that's the biggest thing for me. Yeah.
You think they still have Nick Senzel's phone number?
And that's why there were some people. I tweeted that out. You and I were both tweeting different things about Nick Senzel this weekend, and there were some people that are just like, "Is he going to be part of this future?" I'm like, "No, but is Levi Jordan going to be an outfielder for this future? I surely hope not, because quite frankly, until he was called up, I didn't know who he was. And there's a lot of other guys that are getting outfield playing time that we can find better guys for. I don't know. Like, there's probably no chance of getting Nick Senzel because that relationship didn't end on the best of terms, but that's what we're saying. Go out, make a move, figure something out for the short term, figure something out for next year. Don't sit on your hands. As much as we started this segment off by being on separate ends of this argument, we figured out that we're on the same side here. We were just kind of saying it in different ways.
All right, Jeff, there's a lot more to talk about here. We're going to have to take a hard look at what has gone wrong and then what of it is actually fixable. And coming up after this break, we're going to talk about exactly that. That's next.
Baseball season is moving right along, and you can make some cash on the performances of Elly De La Cruz, Jonathan India, and more over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy platform because they have the largest selection of players, the largest selection of statistics for you to choose from and make some cash off them. All you got to do is pick your favorite players, your favorite stats, click more or less on those stats, and put together at least 2 picks. And in some cases, only 4 picks can get you 100 times your money because PrizePicks loves the game, and you should love the game too. But that's all you got to do. It's so easy. You can do it in like 60 seconds or less. And most times, it's like whenever I'm watching the pregame show, I'm like, let's put together a few picks here on PrizePicks and let's see it roll in. I mean, if you're talking about Elly De La Cruz steals, you're talking about Jonathan India doubles, you're talking about strikeouts for Hunter Green. Check it all out over at PrizePicks and click more on those 3 stats. They've been hitting the more pretty often this season on those statistics. So get in on the action with PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's code all lowercase LOCKEDONMLB for a $100 match up to $100 match on your first deposit. Pick more or pick less. It's that easy.
Here on the Locked On Reds podcast, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news about the Cincinnati Reds. Whether it's the offseason, spring training, the regular season, or the draft, we've got you covered year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for your unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. They are going to get theirs. Don't let the IRS target you. Get the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA to go to bat for you. I know I have filed my taxes multiple different ways throughout the years, and Tax Network USA makes it easy to do that and so much more. With over 14 years of experience and an A-plus rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion with a B dollars in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that big parlay, you hit the Elly parlay and you need help filing your taxes this season and you need help to do it correctly, you just need to call Tax Network USA at 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. For more information, see the link in today's episode description below.
You've got to check out Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And speaking of every day, shout out to our everydayers out there, you guys and gals that hang out with us every single day and go through the travails of this Reds season with us every single day. Really appreciate you guys. And for our everydayers out there, on the next Locked On Reds podcast, we are going to discuss, could the Reds and the Angels be trade partners? We're actually going to have the hosts of Locked On Angels, John and Mike Frisch, join us to discuss that possibility. Because quite frankly, Steve, the Reds, they got to do something, like we said in the first segment, because there has been a lot that has gone wrong, some of it out of their control. But when things like injuries happen, the front office needs to act. They need to get into gear. They need to go out and get somebody, whatever that might look like. The Reds have had so many injuries, and you mentioned the active players. And so Charlie Goldsmith tweet before the game, the Reds could basically fill out a lineup with all the people on the injured list right now. So they're and they're pretty much all position players. There's a couple of relief pitchers, but and Nick Lodolo should be back here in a couple of days with his load blister. But when it comes to the position side of things, that's where they've hurt the most. That's why this lineup has been so very, I don't know, toothless for a lot of different games this season. And I just feel like that's kind of where we got to start with this, because as much as people think that injuries are an excuse, that is an excuse if the front office lets it be.
Well, the injuries are the reality, as you said. And,
right.
I think things began to derail back in the offseason, if we're being honest. And that starts with Nick Krall not going out and getting an outfielder. Everybody that looks at this team and covers this team on even a semi-regular basis was in total agreement that the Reds needed a right-handed outfield bat. Everyone said it. And that doesn't happen very often with people that cover a team. But everyone said it. Right-handed outfield bat. Whether it was an everyday guy or a platoon guy, the Reds needed to do something. They didn't. Instead, they came up with this plan where we're going to use some of our surplus and our infields, and Jonathan India is going to play out there, and Jeff Carr will make a guest appearance, and then we'll keep it covered. And then people started getting hurt. And they started getting hurt early. Mind you that both TJ Friedel and the other guy that got hurt, Matt McLain, both of those guys got hurt in spring training while there was still time for Nick Krall to make a move, whether it was the waiver wire or signing one of the guys that had held out. Tommy Pham was still out there at the time. Martinez was still out there at the time. There were moves that could have been made in spring training. Nick Krall chose not to address them. And then things just keep getting worse from there. And we get these injuries that are day to day, and suddenly they're season-ending surgery injuries. And we get these injuries that were missed for weeks before they were found. And, these weird things that have made me call out this medical staff time and time again. So the injuries, yes, those are out of the front office's control. How they have reacted or how they have not reacted, that was totally within their control. And they have continued to sit on their hands. And now we find ourselves in a state where they're calling up guys that, you and I are dudes that follow this team pretty closely, Jeff. And they've called up guys that I had never heard of before.
Yeah. And whenever I've seen guys like Levi Jordan and Levon Soto. I think I've heard Edwin Rios' name a couple of times because he's had some good performances. But, of course, if you follow our friend Doug Gray over at RedsMinorLeagues.com, you hear about all these guys. But sometimes I forget the names that he writes. He writes a lot of names. But, yeah, whenever these guys got called up, it was just like, who? And then you find out that Levi Jordan had never played in the outfield before. So not only does he get called up and you don't know who he is, but he's starting in right field where he's never played. So it's like, what are we doing here? There's just been so many strange things where they're just like, yes, our organization is deep. And quite frankly, on February 1st, the organization was deep. But then injuries happened. Everything had to move. Everything had to stop. And the organization stopped being deep. But it's as if they've continued to push that narrative. Oh no, we're deep. We got talent. I mean, if you got outfielders that are hitting the injured list or emergency family medical leave for Jake Fraley, things like that, and you're calling up infielders, that's not depth. That's grasping at straws. Well, so go get somebody.
And it goes to one of the other things that I think that has been a big problem this year. We're talking about what has gone wrong. The Reds as an organization continue to put players in situations where they cannot be the best versions of themselves. Just the example you just cited of calling up a kid from the minor leagues. Congratulations, Major League debut. You're playing right field. And you're like, say what now?
I'm a second baseman, coach. What you put me out there?
Yeah, well, you can catch the ball out there. They continue to put these players in these situations where they set them up for failure. And I think that has been another one of the things that have gone wrong because they had their plan and they did prepare India for the plan, but all these other guys were not prepared for this moving around and shuffling that has had to go on as a result of these injuries. So they've set these guys up for failure. And then, the third piece of it is, so guys have gotten hurt. Management has refused to act. We're asking players to do things that they shouldn't be asked to do. And then we sum it up with the players that are still here, that are still in their positions, are not hitting the ball. They're not providing any type of offense at all. And, it's the perfect storm. It's like a Category 5 hurricane hit this Reds roster, and we're just in the shambles.
Yeah, if Elly doesn't hit, if Spencer Steer doesn't hit, the team doesn't score. Like, they need the top third of the lineup to almost never get out.
Oh, and that's just shame on you. I will not tolerate that you excluding Austin Wins from that list.
The double machine.
The double machine.
Wins. That's why there's 2 N's in his last name, not just one. He's the double machine. But that's the other thing, too. Like, you talk about putting guys in the right position that affects them defensively. And quite frankly, there's been some strategies of this team, the way that they've employed certain things that have put them in bad spots. And this is kind of where I want to talk about the contact play for a minute. Because this is something that it's been a theme all season long. And there's not a number, right? There's not a stat that defines this. There's not, you can't go to baseball. You can't even go to our favorite website, Baseball Savant, and find, some kind of base running thing that covers this. The base running stat that Baseball Savant uses does not cover advancing from third base on a ground ball on the infield. That's what we're talking about. This specific nature of the contact play is there's a runner on third base, less than 2 outs.
To be clear, you're talking about the Blake Dunn play from the first game of the Tiger series. That's the
Blake Dunn play. The Jake Fraley play against the Pirates, the Jonathan India play against the Red Sox, the Elly De La Cruz play against, I think it was the Giants. It's happened multiple times. In fact, I looked this up. I went through MLB Film Room. I wrote about this over at CincinnatiRedstock.com if you haven't seen this. But if you haven't seen this, we kind of give you a quick synopsis of it. MLB Film Room gives you every play that happens throughout the season, but you can filter them and do all this different stuff. So I was able to filter it to less than 2 outs, Reds have a runner on third, and contact is made. And then I had to comb through the highlights and see, okay, there was a ground ball. This is what I'm looking for. The Reds have done this 21 times. They've scored 12 times. Admirably. They've been thrown out 8 times, and there's only been 1 time where somebody actually paid attention to where the ball went and decided to slide back into third base and was safe. And that was Elly, by the way, for everybody that loves to, question his baseball IQ. Dude's got it in spades. But just because they score more times than they've thrown out, you can point to 4 games specifically that they've lost because of this play. And I can point to that Tigers game and say, if Blake Dunn doesn't try to score on that ground ball, he scores on Noelvi Marte's ensuing single right after that. Tie ball game, who knows what happens after that. But they don't lose, at least right then and there. I think they should reconsider this. If Elly's on third, sure, whatever, do the contact play because he's Elly. But we shouldn't have this blanket philosophy that David Bell, by the way, has said multiple times. They're running on contact just about every single time, which in David Bell terms means, 100% of the time we're doing that.
You know, it's interesting. Over the weekend, Jeff, I think more than I've seen at any one time, the X feed was filled of fire Nick Krall, fire David Bell takes. And we're not going to have time to get into that today. That's going to have to be on another show. But it's decisions like this that I think are creating that movement. There's always an element of Reds country out there that wants to fire the manager. It's probably been true even of greats.
You're not a true baseball fan if you've not called for your manager's job.
Exactly. So, I think that's something we're going to have to address down the road. But, for a guy that was hired to be analytical and for a guy that was hired to modernize, I feel like he sure makes an awful lot of blanket statements that are regardless of situations. And he's going to do things a certain way no matter what is happening around him. And that's the opposite of what he was hired to do. That's the opposite of what he was touted as when he was brought in here. And I think you're right. It is starting to cost the Reds games.
Steve, only a Sith deals in absolutes. The Reds shall do as they must.
God.
But with all that being said, we've gone long on this episode. With all that being said, there was some good news on Sunday because the Reds figured out who's making it to the AllStar game, and it's none other than Elly De La Cruz. We're going to talk good about Elly coming up next.
Summertime means baseball takes center stage, and you can bet it all on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily, every single day. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. So jump on the FanDuel app right now. You can bet that Elly parlay that we tell you about all the time. That's Elly 1+ on steals, 1+ on runs scored, and 2+ on total bases. Elly, that's all-star Elly De La Cruz, can make you some money over on FanDuel. Don't feel comfortable building a parlay yet? Lots of other ways to play. You can get in on the money line. You can get in on some other parlays if you want to start with more than just one player. You can check out all of baseball. Maybe you want to bet the division-leading Milwaukee Brewers. I don't know why you would want to, but you could. Point is, FanDuel has something for everybody. Just visit FanDuel.com, and you can add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. You can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds. Also, as Jeff mentioned, you can bookmark CincinnatiRedsTalk.com for written content about your Cincinnati Reds. Jeff's writing over there. James Rapine's writing a ton over there. Lots of great Reds coverage in written form. All right, Jeff, you're right. This episode is running up hard against the end, but we've got a lot more to cover because it wasn't all bad news over the weekend. We did learn who would be the representative of the Cincinnati Reds in the All-Star game down in Texas next week, and that is going to be Elly De La Cruz. And that was a foregone conclusion, right? We were kind of all knew it was going to be Elly. The only real question was, were we going to get 2? Was Hunter Green going to get to go also? Turns out, no, he does not. It's only going to be Elly. And, well, I'm sorry, let me not forget All-Star manager, assistant coach, David Bell, be down there in Texas as well.
I saw somebody ask the question, can he get ejected from an All-Star game? And no one ever has. So maybe he could be the first, but no, I don't think he will though. But yeah, no, I look, if you're surprised by Elly De La Cruz making the All-Star game, then what rock you been living under? Dude's been the best player on this team all year long. He is doing amazing things. He has been marketed. And I think this is kind of the big thing. I mean, it's easy for us to talk about the statistics. We do this all the time when it comes to Elly because the performances are amazing. But Major League Baseball has really started to market him. In fact, Jeff, he was the player that they featured on the image of the reserve roster.
And that's not from the Reds account. That was from the @MLB account, featured Elly De La Cruz next to the list of reserves.
Suck it, Paul Skeens. Anyway, when it comes to Elly De La Cruz, like there was this great video of like, what if Elly was your coworker, and it kind of had the vibes of like This Is Sports Center commercials that they used to do back in the day. I love that. They had a commercial about Elly meeting some guys at a baseball, at a MLB team store. I don't know why I couldn't think of that word. But all this different stuff and these different, social media things. I mean, Topps features him on the Series 2 hobby box, all this other stuff. Like, it is clear that everyone sees how awesome he is, and he's going to be able to put it on display, at least for an at-bat in the All-Star game. I know there's some folks, and I don't know how you feel about this, but there's some folks that didn't love that he turned down the home run derby again, but I'm fine with it. Like, there's an element of the home run derby that he's just not ready for, and I think that it shows a lot of smarts and a lot of maturity on his part that he's just like, I'm not ready for that yet. I'll get there and I'll win it, but, I don't need to do that right now.
Yeah, I do like that he's not in the home run derby. There is some data out there that shows that players that participate in the home run derby, it takes them a few weeks to actually recover from that experience because they're swinging so much so hard. As far as the usage for Elly, what I would like to see happen, obviously he's not going to be a starter. I would like to see them put him in the game as a pinch runner for somebody and then keep him in the game for an at-bat or two. So start him off right on the bases because that's his electricity. That's his bread and butter. Pinch run with him, and then leave him out there to play some shortstop and get a couple of at-bats. That's how I would like to see them use him during the All-Star game down in Arlington.
And you could do like a double switch with that, in which case David Bell has been waiting to do a double switch. It's been a while since he's
missed them. It's been a long time.
He's been missing them. So that'll be a good thing there. And a quick word too as well. The futures game, which, by the way, if you looked at all of the different reserves and all this other stuff, the guys that were named to the All-Star team on Sunday for both the AL and the NL, there were 33 players that are making their first ever appearance in the Midsummer Classic. I mean, you'd be forgiven if you thought that you were looking at the futures games roster because of all these young players. I think I even saw there's like 19 different players that are under the age of 27. Just showing that the future of the game looks good on the field as long as the people running it don't try to mess it up. But all these young guys, and it kind of makes me think of the futures game that we found out, I think it was earlier last week, but that Rhett Lauder and Cam Collier will also be in attendance of. I think that's the day before the All-Star game, I think.
I actually, the home run derby is the day before. I believe the futures game is actually played on Sunday at the same time the last regular season game before the break is played down there in Texas.
People in charge messing things.
And before I let you get out of here, before we wrap this up, while we're talking All-Stars, you got to talk about your guy, Jeff Hoffman, making the All-Star game. You still have that jersey?
Thanks everybody for checking out today's Locked On Reds podcast. Oh, I did see that. That's the thing too. Like I was thinking about this, like 2 weeks ago, Fernando Cruz was in that conversation, but he has just hit a wall so hard, man. Like, I mean, Jeff Hoffman's been good. He really has. I picked him up a couple of times in fantasy this year. I will be, full disclosure on that. When I've needed somebody to give me some points or something as a relief pitcher, I've gotten him because he's had a good year. So good on him. He's figuring out that whole career thing. Finally. And that's where we're going to end today's Locked On Reds podcast. Thanks everybody so much for checking us out. And look, we're going to be here with you every single day talking about this Reds team as we move through the season. And there's still a chance, it's very small, we're talking about the slimmest of margins now, that the Reds can get back in this thing. It's going to take a miracle. But maybe the front office can do something to help that out.
Cardinals devil magic miracle. Yeah, you need to win you need a 15-game heater, Jeff.
Yeah. Didn't we once have a former Cardinals GM? Maybe we should look at doing that again. Just kidding. Anyway, let's tomorrow, again, like I mentioned, the guys from Locked On Angels, John and Mike Frisch, will be joining us to discuss whether the Reds and the Angels could get together for a trade. But until then, Steve, what can folks expect from you and me?
Well, you and I are going to continue to lobby for this team to do something. We're going to poke it with a stick as best we can. We're going to listen for the rumors. We're going to watch the waiver wires. We're going to make suggestions to Nick Krall. And we're going to gather up all that information and bring it back here to keep you locked on Reds every single day.
Hey, Steve, that wasn't coffee in my mug.
You think? You think?